Hello. Hope everybody's doing okay. Um, I am working on this is part 3 of the pub. So this will complete the painting. And if you haven't watched the video or anything, I'm working on paintings that are reminiscent of my late husband who passed away this spring. I want to paint as many paintings I can of him, keep him alive, my memories of him, and for our grandchildren and our daughters. But it's really a way for me to process my grief. And I have all these images flowing through my mind, and I just want to get them out there. I'm been doing art pretty much my whole life. It's definitely been a go-to. And I've used it either as my whole income or to supplement my income my whole adult life as well. Up until a little less than a year and a half ago, I was still working at a studio where I taught people to paint. It closed, and actually in a sort of serendipitous time where my husband was sick and I was able to care for him and stay at home and take care of him because of that, amongst other things, with the support of our daughters and things like that to help us, and all these things enabled me to get that time to spend with him, knowing it was limited, hoping it wasn't. But by that time, we knew we were just holding on to moments, and we held on to as many as we could. And so now I'm just trying to hold on to moments that we shared in the whole 28 years that we were together. Now, I was surprised by how long this painting took me, but I never really keep track of how long things take me to paint. When I was working in the studio, we did, because we had to time paintings to work within class time. But those were different paintings. They were not as detailed, and they weren't personal works of art, and so they were already painted. Like, if I was going to paint this again, it would be much faster because I've already done it. But when you're painting something for the first time, you're not just sitting there following a script, or not that they give us a script, but we were working off of an image that already occurred. I didn't always paint it ahead of time, but by the time you've done enough of those, you go back, sitting there trying to recreate something. A lot of times is easier than just trying to pull all the pieces out of your mind. And that's what I'm doing here. Like I said, this is painting 5, and soon I'll complete this original series, which was the Dream series, inspired by a dream I had when we first received my husband's cancer diagnosis. And so I, and although going through the cancer treatments made us even closer than we were before. I know that my husband would want to be remembered from beyond that, because he was so much more than a diagnosis. You know, he was that person that fought that off. And that person that wanted to live and enjoy life. You know? And so that's what I want. I want it to come out. My daughters, every once in a while, catch me doing these or listen to a bit of them, and they say I sound a little somber. I'm not trying to sound somber. Of course, there are a lot of aspects of it that are. I think it's also just my awkwardness of being recording. The only reason I'm able to sort of do this is, even though I'm talking to people, I'm sort of talking to the air. And that sort of allows me, because I'm not trying to perform to someone, just trying to be straightforward and say what it is. So here we're sitting at this. We used to go to this cafe. It was a pub. It was like an Irish pub. And we frequented there, and that's where this painting is sort of inspired from. It's not an exact replica of the pub. It's got that dream-esque quality to it, but it's just more, you know, the vibe of us being there and talking and just, you know, being together, and to see where this, you know, where our roots that became our family, you know, that grew over those 28 years. And, you know, we had this very strong connection right away. And we went from meeting to moving in together within a week to planning forever and wanting children. Just everything so quickly. We were met with a lot of a lot of people that questioned our decisions, and it was out of love, you know. It was, but all it did was cement what we were already working towards and building. You know, it was Vince and Wendy against the world. And that just made the bond even stronger. So keep that in mind. You know, it's hard though. You do have the best intentions, and I know that I can see it a lot clearer now. It irritated me to no end. It wasn't that I couldn't see it back then. It was to them the fact that it seemed so not who I was, because that was not typical of me. That that was a sign that it was the wrong decision. But to me, that was the sign that it was the right decision. Because I was not easily smitten. Now, infatuated beforehand, like, you meet someone, you think you know one, but when you really get to know someone and just connection, it's a totally different thing. You know, usually, if I was smitten with someone, I'd be kind of where, as soon as if I, go out with them once, I knew, no. And it usually took less than that once. You just knew, and I should have known beforehand. And if I had the experience that I had with Vince, then I would have. Not that you can't have multiple relationships. I'm not. You learn something from everything, and I'm not belittling that. It's just, hindsight's always 20/20. I can see it. You can see it clearer because you have all the information. It just so sometimes it's important to know, have a goal, because it'll help guide you to where you need to be. And one of my biggest goals was, family and just finding someone that I could feel comfortable around. And hands down, I definitely felt that way around Vince. That was the key, the core piece. He was home. And wherever he was, that was home. It wasn't, it was just wherever he was, that was home. And the same was, with him, with me. We always, that's where we were always aiming to get to. Back to each other. And that's kind of the hard part that I'm dealing with right now, is there's that part of you, when you lose someone like that, part of you that just wants to run and be with them. But I feel, just as much as I felt like I needed to be with my husband, I feel like I have more things that I need to accomplish. And, even doing this artwork, really pushing myself to complete something that I've been thinking about for a long time. Not just a one-off, a larger thing. It's important. This is something I want to accomplish, something I want to do, something that is part of my journey. And it's not just paintings I want to accomplish in my life. I want to watch my grandbabies get older, and my girls, and I want to do things. There's things in life I want to accomplish. And, although I was hoping to have Vince along my side, while doing these things, he's not. So I have to sort of figure that out. It's a weird thing when you're used to sort of being, always considering and thinking about someone else, and always, knowing you have this person by your side to go do these things. It gives you extra strength because you have them. But what I do have is, I want him. In some ways it pushes me more, even though I get overwhelmed. It pushes me to want to do, things that I think that he'd be proud of. that if he was looking down, he'd be like happy to see that that's what I was doing. And I'm not completely there, but I'm working on it. And I hope he's doing okay. In my mind's eye, he is. I wish I had something more concrete, something I gotta truly say yes, because all I have is a feeling. And that goes for my mom too, losing my mom. I don't feel like the relationship is over. I feel like it's still a part of me, and they're still involved in their own, whatever it is. They still give me strength and help push me forward. My my spirituality is not something that I can easily put words to. It's been a weird journey for me, and I've picked it apart, and I'm sort of building back up again. I started with I grew up as Episcopalian, going to church every Sunday with my family, very involved with them, and it was a great church. The people just were wonderful people, and the priest was the type of person that he didn't care. He was willing to have philosophical discussions with you, and even if you didn't agree with his beliefs or you completely went against them, and he was an interesting person to talk to, and just overall the whole church had just really good energy, so much so that some of my people that I've known the longest still now, even if sort of indirectly to the side, are people that I grew up going to that church. And my parents, some of their dearest, closest friends were people from that church when we were younger. Now my parents just never left. They, were always part of the church, and they still, go to an Episcopalian church. Well, my dad does. My mom just passed, but, my dad's always sung in the choir. And they found a place down here, and it wasn't, they sort of went to one, went to another. These churches in Florida were a little different than the churches up in the Washington, D.C. area. And that got some adjusting to do. But over the past, 30 years, they found a good place and, a community. But not like that church, the one that we grew up in. That was just that was a unique place, filled with, I don't know, just amazing people, and just all kinds of people from so many. It was just a really unique group of people that I was, lucky to have in my life. But when I was a young adult, I really went against the church, and it wasn't. I was very spiritual. I just didn't the general restrictions of organized religion and stuff I had issues with. And so I sort of fought against that, but it was also me fighting against my parents and just the general expectations of life. I wanted to do my own thing, and I didn't want anybody to tell me how to do it. And I still have that bit of me And that was one of the things that sort of connected Vince and I. Not just the we definitely didn't like people telling us what to do. Um, which is, it's a you have to sort of grow. You have to realize when to let that go, and when to hold on to that. Because there's, always that two sides to the coin. And, but I had a good friend, childhood friend, and both her and I, our spiritual side really developed. And some people might say it was witchy, it was whatever, but it was more just spiritual, and thinking about nature and the connection between spirit and nature and all that kind of thing. And even we acknowledged that our beliefs, although there were similarities, they were very different. And we even did a children's book together and stuff. And she married, my cousin. But unfortunately, our almost 40 years of friendship was ended because of some controversies when we were doing that book together and whatever. We both wanted different things from life, and we were, very, very close. Our families always did things together. It was almost like a divorce, the separation, and it was it's still not commended, but because she's married to my cousin, there's connections and stuff, and so it's definitely not easy. But I wish them all the best, and I hope that they're do well, and that the path that they went, is, I hope, that they're happy and stuff. But it was a huge change, but that really made me even question more my belief system. And since then, and then, really, I almost sort of put everything I couldn't do, like everything I had sort of developed and sort of thought about, and my own little life rituals, and celebration of the seasons, and just things, I just sort of pushed that all aside. And I was filled with other things, and good things, and other growth. But I really didn't sort of start pulling it back, because I almost, that whole thing sort of really affected me and made me question who I was, like who was I, where was I really coming from, me personally. And when my husband did receive his diagnosis, I did, it evolved again, my whole system, and his too, because both of us, always fighting against, it was hard to, but we found our own peace in our own way. And I can't say we both were exact either, to that we, but we had similar things. And that's what it is. You have to find what brings you peace. And I've really done a lot of searching, and a lot of reading and stuff like that. And one of the people that really influenced me was C.S. Lewis and his transformation. And it's not exactly the same. And he even went through the death of his wife. They weren't quite the same. They weren't together as long as my husband and I, and it wasn't exactly the same type of relationship, but there was a great love. And, great loves can have a lifetime, but some could have a day. It's just, you don't know. That timeline, it's a fickle thing. And so now I'm sort of growing and redeveloping my own spirituality. And it's personal, It really is. It's when it comes down to it, it's something that, and it was always sort of that way, even though, just like when people always want to know where you're coming from, and so it comes out, like when people say, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" and or they want titles for who you are, and there aren't always clear titles, maybe not the words to say who you are, what you believe, or what you see in life. And that is what I love about art, is that there's things in color and painting that, to me, speak in ways that other things don't. And although these paintings are much more sort of like illustrations, and that's almost like a straightforward, story visual, there's more to it than that. There's in the colors I choose, and just so many factors to me. But see, that's also the beauty of art, because it doesn't matter what it is to me. I mean, it does to me, but ultimately, when you share your artwork with other people, you hope that they will see something in it, that it'll evoke an emotion personally to themselves, and they will see a story in it that does something for them. And that's what you want. You want it to reach people, in their heart, and move them, make them want to linger, and it doesn't have to be the story that I see or the emotions that I get from it. It just has to reach inside their heart, and they can find their own story in it. Kind of like a book. And it can take you on a journey. It's walking through the wardrobe, to that other world. And that's what paintings are, sort of that doorway, that window into a world that comes from the artist, but it opens a window that maybe you wouldn't have opened. But when you see it open, you can't help but look through. I always found windows fascinating. I've had some interesting experiences with windows. And even I remember when I was a teenager, I was, always seeking things that might, I don't know, push my fear. And the funny thing is, I was not into horror flicks or anything like that. That stuff freaked me out. But, going visiting in a cemetery at night, or, doing other things like that, I would, just sort of pushing the boundaries. Like, we used to climb into Dumbarton Oaks in Washington, D.C. at night and dance around in the moonlight in the gardens. Until they got dogs, and then we stopped doing that. Um, it was a thing. You climb over the fence and you could go in there and, uh, why go in daylight when you're supposed to? I do not suggest anybody doing that. But it was just something I like to do. But we went to an old graveyard. And it had, I have to go back and look at how old the graves were, but a lot of them were over 100 years old or older. And it was next to this old church. And went there at nighttime. We were going to go explore it. And when we were walking towards it, there was this window, like it was floating in the middle of the cemetery. And it was like a 4-paned window. So 4 rectangles just sitting there floating of like glowing yellow. And it was dark, so you just saw this window. And first just froze, sitting there staring at it and trying to figure it out, knowing that the cemetery backed up against the woods and there was no building there. And just trying to figure out what that possibly, trying to find that rational thing that belonged. Where did that window come from? There has to be a logical explanation. There has to be a logical reason. Sorry. I'm forgetting how to speak English here. And so you're just, the rational side of you is sitting there trying to figure it out. But I could not. We just got back in that car and left. But did go back later so that I could look at it in daylight to confirm that there was nothing there. Like, what could that light have been? What was that window that was just glowing from the middle of the cemetery? Where could it have come from? And I could not find a logical reason whatsoever when I went back in daylight. There was not. And things like that. And I don't know what it was, or I have no answers to it, or why. But it's one of the things that happened in my life that just gives me that eternal question mark, right? But to me, I see it as a veil between, I don't know, planes of consciousness or other dimensions or heaven or somewhere other than here, something other. I've always been fascinated with things like quantum physics and, just multiple things happening at once. And it does come into play into my beliefs as well. Because that's just one of a multitude of things that sort of didn't play right with, what we would say, reality and logic. Yet, it was there, and in that case, seen by multiple people. But not, always. But in that case, it was. And, it definitely stopped us in our tracks. And it wasn't like we went running screaming. We just quietly, after sort of staring for a while and trying to figure it out and whatever, got back in our car and decided it was best to leave. But I don't know. No explanation. And it doesn't, that's, it doesn't necessarily have to have one, but it just comes into play with me and how I view the world. And I am happy that I'm able to sort of, dive into this and sort of because I sort of pushed aside the sort of spiritual side of things until you're at your worst and you need that, you need that strength, that extra something, and it sends you searching for answers, searching for comfort. Push beyond everything. But life is always flowing and changing, and I don't know where it'll develop. Only time will tell, and also, what efforts I make. Because effort and progression forward is up to us as individuals to do, to make happen. Oh, didn't mean to get too heavy. I guess, that's okay. That's part of this too. You gotta dive right in. I know everybody has their own views, and you want to chime right in and put your 2 cents in. I am not beyond listening. I have no problem. That was the great thing about my husband and I, is we did not have to agree on everything, right? But we respected each other, and we could listen to each other. And sometimes we changed each other's minds. Sometimes we did not. And sometimes, it wasn't a clean thing. We just sort of bent the other person's vision of things, or just sort of showed them things. And it went both ways. So, if you're respectful to me, I will be respectful to you. I have, I'll pretty much be respectful of you too, no matter what. I have no desire to sit here and argue with people about it. Now, if I knew you better, I could get into big debates about stuff, but I'm not even, more of a discussion. I have no desire to sit here and bicker with people, if that's your goal. I find, and fighting against things for a long time when I was younger, it makes people not listen. But if you're calm and you talk to people and you just try to be respectful, that's where you can grow from there. And if you do that, and people know you respect them, and vice versa, usually, comes into play. It just seems like so many people now, it's this blanket of, you have to be exactly where I'm coming from, and you have to match my belief system completely, and my and I'm not saying, I'm not saying you have to have people in your life that you think they're morally deprived. Okay, that's your own thing, man. But I don't think it's always such a strong line, and it just seems like so much more now. I just felt like you used to be able to talk about things and discuss things and stuff like that, and it didn't have to be so end of the world. And that's, I think, sad that people have to be that way. That and it goes in the way that it makes people. I know I am less likely to speak freely because people's reactions to things can be very, very strong, and you don't want to unnecessarily cause conflict, or I don't want to unnecessarily cause conflict. It's and so sometimes it makes me more guarded, even talking here. Of course, I'd be much more candid speaking to people that I'm close to. But that could be part of it too. Sometimes you just learn when it's best to keep your mouth shut. And who won't be willing to be able to just go, oh, okay, well, you believe what you believe and I believe what I believe. And it seems like, no matter what, some people are just gung-ho and making sure that they can push their beliefs on you. And you can see where they're coming from. And I've definitely tried to, like when you're having discussions about stuff, and not with just anybody, but, people you're close to, we will sit there and, fight for your belief system, but in a respectful way. And that goes with also, if someone goes, no, I don't want to talk about that man. Then you're like, cool. We don't need to talk about that. But usually I'm pretty open to sit there and listen to other people's beliefs or perspective on things. Doesn't mean you're going to change my mind, but for sure I do not know everything in the world, and the more information you have, the more informed decision you can make about stuff. Although sometimes, I tell you, I feel like when it comes to things like the news, like right now, hardest time watching any sort of news, and we always sort of paid attention to a pretty broad spectrum of things, but I just get even basic stuff. I feel like every angle of it, it's just about trying to get people to watch. And it's like the people, predicting the hurricanes. It's going to be the worst hurricane year ever. It's all about freaking people out. It's like, come on, man. Couldn't you go, I think we're going to have a great year, barely any storms. It should be awesome. They don't want to be wrong, first of all, because if there aren't storms, then they go, yay, we were lucky, it didn't happen, right? Uh, but there's something to be said for like crying wolf, because then people are like become complacent. I know in Florida, people are like, we rarely, when I first moved here and when the kids were younger, I was much more likely to evacuate or, sort of move inland. But our place has not budged in all the years that we've lived here. And we lived in this place 27 years, despite there was a few year stretch where we went somewhere else, but this place was still here, and it survived all the storms. And so it's hard to not sit there and go, what? And it's so much easier to stay home. You have your stuff, and we have animals, and it's just a lot packing stuff up and taking things with you. It's just, what are you gonna do? And we've been actually, our place, strangely enough, where we are, we have ban very lucky over the years where we would get power before a lot of other people. And I think the placement of our house, maybe near some hospitals nearby, and just, I don't know. Sometimes we don't even lose power. And other people not far away will not have power for weeks. And I just have to say, thank goodness that we had that, because, but at the same time, hurricanes can be a big deal. So I guess, you gotta think about that kind of stuff too. We're pretty lucky here. Most of the time, we don't get direct hits. Now, we've had them where, they're coming straight across from the West Coast all the way. And we've had, like 2004, we had 4 hurricanes, and it was more the incessant rain that caused us so much issues. The flooding and the aftermath, because that year there was so much water that it really affected us past that, because the next year and the year after, there were these giant trees that the root system was completely compromised, and so trees that weren't affected right away were affected in the long run, because they were severely damaged because of all the flooding. And it just there was those kind of issues, and so you have these big oak trees falling down, and but usually the way where we are, the hurricanes either go just south of us or north of us. They sort of, we curve in, and just the way the shelf is there, in the ocean, it just sort of bounces from one and goes to just north of us the majority of the time. We've been pretty lucky. I've been here for a long time, and I've been here 30 years? 31 years? I can't remember. I think 30 years. Anyway. And really minimal real issues with hurricanes. Usually it makes for a really good trimming of old debris. Because then what happens is it blows down everything, so everybody's got to clean out all that stuff out of their yard. There's branches everywhere, and it makes people do extra trimming, because there's so many trucks going around, just these big, I always say they're Darth Vader trucks, because they have these really high sides, and they're just filled to the brim with yard debris. And they go around, and there's this huge black trucks that are drive around, and they're just filled up, and there's just all this cleanup because of it. And in some ways it's like a renew, because then it allows all, this greenery to sort of come from the moisture that came from the storm and the nature's way of trimming everything. You know, it's a renew, and I'm sure in some way that's how Mother Nature worked it. You know, it didn't have humans to come around and trim back its trees to make them grow taller and get back the dead, cut back the dead wood and stuff like that. And so these great storms could come in and do amazing things. But with people around, that it does not always work out, because they could do tremendous damage. And then there's other issues, people without power, the heat, and stuff like that can cause so many more issues. You have to excuse my voice. I mean, it's just extra scratchy, and I'm a little still getting rid of all those symptoms from this cold. It's like lingered forever. But as, the storms go. It's some of the stuff that the people have to deal with, and the destruction of their houses, and the flooding, and that sucks, man. You hate that. We've been lucky where we are, and the flooding, and I told you about the electric. It really hasn't been an issue. But I know people that have had to completely gut their houses because there was so much flooding, and sometimes it's sewage water, or just a mixture of sewage and storm water. And they just have to completely rip down all their houses, the insides of their houses, and get rid of furniture and things, mementos and things like that, because where they are, the flooding, and that's sad. But there are things that you can see where nature sort of, without people, it was doing its own thing, It was making sure that the things were living on and growing. And you get the same thing with the fires out west and stuff. There's those fir trees that have to be singed in fire before they grow. Growth comes from the flame. That's definitely reminiscent of the Phoenix Rising. But same time, people live there, California, and the smoke, and I'm a big fan of people. I know some people are like, too many people, and it's whatever. And don't get me wrong, I definitely have the part of me that just, wants my own time, my privacy, things like that. But for the overall, I think mankind is pretty amazing. And I think that the things that we've done, and people see them, as destruction of the earth. And yes, but I see beauty and artistry and amazing things that mankind has done. And that's what I like to see and concentrate on. So, I don't want families' homes to burn down, or flood, or be destroyed, or because of Mother Nature. But you can see why that stuff sort of happens if you sort of take us out of the mix. That it was sort of the earth taking care of itself. In the fires, it was getting rid of the brush. Florida's really worked on that. When the year that Vince and I got together, we had tremendous fires in the area here. And so much so that we lived sort of in the center of Daytona, away from the main fires, but they really were surrounding our town. So it wasn't like they were far, far away, but they weren't downtown. and ash was falling like snow. And, people were, kids were being, kept inside, and people were being kept home from work in some cases, and places were being evacuated. And it was crazy. And it was funny because not funny, but at the time, it sort of just, everything Vince and I were going through, where people were sort of fighting us against us being together. And the whole place was like burning. And, but, we all made it out of that. Since then, though, what I was going to say was that Florida's really worked on taking care of their brush ahead of time. Doing those controlled burns. Now, controlled burns can get out of hand, don't get me wrong, but it makes a huge difference when they go in there and they do that. We've had some issues with fire right across the street from where we are in the woods, and actually the year that we met, it burned back in there. But the year that my husband got his cancer diagnosis, we had, it was 2023. And that Christmas, right before then, the county came in. There was a place that had burned down right around the 2020 mark. And it had sort of become a homeless camp. And I don't know if the drugs running out. It was just not, a lot of sketchy people in that area. And they finally came and cleared the whole thing out and kicked the people out. But there was a backlash to the whole thing. And there were these tires and stuff that were on the property, because they did eventually come and bulldoze things. The city came in and bulldozed the whole camp. It was just, there were like 5-gallon buckets full of feces, and it was just not pretty. But anyway, so the people that they pretty sure it was the people that were there, went and got these tires and put them around the woods and lit these tires on fire. And it just caused all these fires across the street, which really sucked because we are directly right next to the woods where we are. And, I could sit there and watch the flames from our window, and just hoping it wasn't going to leap over. But they came in and they just, with bulldozers and the firemen, and it was, I don't know. But the good thing was it sort of cleared out the woods. And for a while there, after the fires went out, I was enjoying being able to walk through the woods again, because, I don't know, if you know Florida woods, they're just very low brush, hard to walk through, and quite frankly, to me, a little scarier because of that. Like, I love walking up the woods up north, but Florida, I like to stick to more paths than digging through the brush and stuff like that. To me, that's a little bit scarier. Just with the reptiles and you name it, not fun. And it's pointy. You have all the saw palmettos, and it's just not comfortable. Just not the same. So, much more go on a trail type of person. And there's a lot of like pathways down here you'll find that are almost like boardwalks, walking through swampy areas, stuff like that, which are nice because you're not destroying those areas, and you can walk up over them, and you can see nature and up, and you're not disturbing the wildlife and the ecosystem in the area by staying up on these boardwalk areas. But when the whole forest, the woods behind our house was sort of got automatic trim by flame, I used to walk the dogs every morning, and I would walk them through the woods where I normally wouldn't want to because there was so much brush, and we had, because of 2020 and before then, there was like a large homeless population in those woods because we were close enough to town. We're in, like where they've close enough action to be able to get places, and there were already paths through the woods that you could walk, sort of cut through, because there's only one way in and out. So if you were a walker, faster to go through the woods to the other side. So if you wanted to go to the grocery store or, other various places, you'd cut off your time by going through the woods. So there was already that. Like, there was a couple times my husband worked not that far away. But, car trouble or something happened. He had to walk to work. But it was a 15-minute walk. And but only if you walk through the woods. But as a woman, me walking through the woods by myself was not something I would do. Now, I still didn't walk through them by myself. I had gigantic dogs with me. But it was nice being able to sort of go and do that again. I do really like being in the woods, and having that where I could do that every morning what was nice. Now, we have some things in the woods. We have like hogs, and I haven't seen a bear in a long time. We had this one bear that was there for years, and then she was killed on the road. As you go through the woods, there's a road on the other side, a little ways. Now, some of that stuff's compromised because they built a neighborhood, so we still have this area that's just woods in between that other neighborhood and our neighborhood. That's pretty wide band in between. But and there's wetlands and stuff like that in that area. So there are hogs and wild turkey and bobcat, and you name it, in that sort of urban forest. And I see them. I go out pretty early, and there's you get sighting deer that are all in that area. And even with the building of the neighborhood on the other side, but I'm sure it's been compromised because of all that growth. There's so much. It's like really, are there all these people moving in there and building stuff here? And a lot of it is like stick construction. I'm like, okay, how long is this freaking gonna last? You can't build this better. I just don't understand all these apartment buildings. And in some of the places, there's like this neighborhood that has these like houses. They're almost, some of them are like townhouses, some are like they're individual family houses, but they're so close together, like you can't park up front where these houses are, like parking somewhere else, but they're just like pathways in between. There's this whole neighborhood in the area, and I just don't understand it. I don't want to sit there and look out my window and see my neighbor 5 feet away from my window. I mean, I just don't understand that. But they're just trying to shove as many people as they can into one little space, and I'm just like, man, I don't know. I don't even know if these places are filling up or not. I can't even tell you, but it just seems like way more apartments than we need. And I don't know, some of them might be sort of supplemental housing for the universities nearby, because we have Embry-Riddle, and Daytona State, and Bethune-Cookman, all right here in downtown Daytona. And so I don't know if it has to do with that. I know some of it is to do with that, but I'm just like, I don't know. It's just like all this fast construction of just a apartment complex after apartment complex after apartment complex. And I don't know. It seems like cheap construction to me. But I don't have to live there, so apartments are not my thing. Although I can't definitively say that, okay? Because the only time I lived in an apartment was about the first 9 months of my life. I've stayed in apartments, other people's apartments. I've visited them. I'm not saying they're not lovely apartments. My parents live in a condo. I just don't see it, Especially, my parents, they're right on the ocean. There's certain things they really dig, the community vibe of being in a condo, because they really get to know their neighbors, and they rely on all that and stuff like that. And I'm just not like that. It's not that my neighbors, I hope they're groovy and having a good life. And I'm sure there's circumstances. Vince was always better with this. It's good to know your neighbors so they can help you out. But my neighbors, we know each other. We acknowledge each other. And there's some that I'd be more willing to go up to than others if I needed something, for sure. But I'm not hanging out with my neighbors. Anyway, we've come to an end. I hope you have a great night. Thanks for listening.